Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to have Chris with us, I think, first time at the conference, Chris.
It is, indeed. They tried to give me one of the pins, but I realized you're only allowed to have a pin if you've been to every conference, so I thought that would be misleading. It is my first time here. Great to be with you. Great to be here at AHIF.
Karibu.
And with you. Yeah.
Karibu, as we say. I know you were down and experiencing magical Kenya.
I was
directly
indeed.
Yourself with the Minister Najib Balala this morning. How did you find that?
I had a chance to practice some of my dance moves. I've been in Kenya, in Nairobi, for 24 hours, and I've danced 3 times since I've been here. If my wife were to see that after she finished, a huge amount of laughter, she'd realize she's been trying to get me to dance, for years and years, and I don't do a lot of it. The fact that I've done 3 dances in 24 hours, I think she'd be impressed by.
But I can tell you, it was pretty impressive.
Magical Kenya was great to answer the question. It was wonderful to be with Secretary Balala and the Secretary General of the UNWTO and a lot of other folks from around the continent of Africa, in addition to Kenya, to celebrate, what's a spectacular opportunity here, obviously in Kenya and Nairobi, but also all around Africa, which I know you guys are talking a lot about here.
Yeah, well, we all love it, obviously. That's why we're all here. The theme of the conference this year is invest, create, and conserve, and I just want to make sure we sort of touch on all those. But perhaps if we just start sort of a little bit big picture, you folks are celebrating 100 years next year. Spreading the light and warmth of hospitality.
We are indeed. It's fun and exciting to be leading or even part of the company, in the sense that not many companies, when you really think about it, celebrate 100 years. No. Just they don't make it that far. And in our case, obviously I've been at the company only 11 years, so it's not like I created this thing. I feel like I've contributed, but millions of people have contributed their hearts and souls over a long time. And our founder, who was a pretty inspirational guy, if you look out the window and look up the hill and you think about the nerve it took and the pioneering spirit it took to be here in Nairobi 50 years ago, think about it that way, to be at the Hilton on the African continent 60 years ago. Nobody was doing that. And what today seems like is simple, and of course you do it. Back in the day, he was really ahead of the curve and very much a pioneer. And I think the fun part about celebrating our 100th year anniversary, more fun, I suspect, for we at Hilton than all the rest of you. But since I'm on stage, you have to suffer through hearing me talk about it. Conrad Hilton had a really simple philosophy, if you go back and read the history of the company, and that is he really believed in his heart and his mind that travel could make the world a better place, and with a fundamental belief that if you create an opportunity for safe and secure environments where people could have what they needed from a functionality and service point of view all over the world, that it would stimulate travel, which would stimulate exchange of ideas and greater knowledge of cultures, as between different peoples around the world. And I would say he was right. And, our company has played a meaningful role here in Nairobi and the Hilton, but all over the world as pioneering new locations. And, and my belief is that as much as we're celebrating 100 years, it's really always about the future. Certainly my shareholders, while they would love to do a few high fives on that great 100 years, all they care about is the future.
The next 100.
Our customers care about the next 100. Our team members, who are looking for opportunities, care about the next 100. And so in that way, it's really exciting in the sense that Hilton is in a really good place. We're growing all over the world. We have spectacular brands, I think the best brands in the business. And while we're widely distributed, if you look at the numbers, 5,400 hotels, almost 900,000 rooms around the world, so we're one of the biggest in the world, there are certainly parts of the world, including where I sit, which is why I'm here, where I would argue, notwithstanding a 60-year history on the African continent, we're just getting started. I mean, we have, 50, well, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, so
Nick knows I'm great at a filibuster, so
it's quite,
I'll let you ask a question.
Chris is one of the easiest guys to interview. You can broadly say good morning, and,
There he goes.
You get going. 5,500.
You're pretty good yourself. Based on
Five and a half.
usually Nick and I vying for time.
Yeah, we're trying to see. There's someone keeping score at the back. Patrick's keeping minute score, and whoever loses, we don't know what the reward for losing is, but it won't be good.
A dance on stage later tonight.
With feather dusters. 5,500 hotels, nearly 900,000 rooms. But the pipeline, and I know that's one of your favorite topics, and I don't want to miss out on that. Can we pop the pipeline up for Africa?
Let's see if you have the numbers right.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have to count them now.
All right.
Just
Well, I know what the
dots.
pipeline around the world.
Yeah, so around the world, you've got 2,500, nearly 400,000 rooms. Is it true that you're expecting the development guys to deliver 1 million rooms in your 100th year?
Absolutely, it is true. And Patrick to do most of it here in Africa.
Because he hasn't got much to do.
He doesn't. Well, Africa's interesting, as I was getting ready to say before you interrupted me, Nick. We have a long history, longer, I think, than anybody, certainly of the major brands, but and we're big at 900,000 rooms and all the stats we talk about, but we're not big here. I mean, our brands are well known here, but we're not big. And so what that is opportunity knocking, because if you look at the stats, and everybody's here, I assume for the same reason I'm here, is just a gargantuan growth opportunity. I mean, if you look at, like, fast forward, everybody around the global hospitality industry has been talking a lot about Asia. I know here we're talking about Africa, but if you were to sort of, figure out scientifically where a lot of the discussion's been, it's been around Asia, because that's just been a gargantuan growth opportunity over the last 10 or 20 years. Well, reality is Africa is much the same, in my opinion, has been high growth, but I think the next 20 years could be exponential growth in Africa for some really basic reasons, and that is urbanization over the next 20 years, looking at any stats, is expected to be the greatest here on the African continent. The top 10, as a consequence of that, the top 10 fastest growing cities in the world over the next 20 years should be African cities. In terms of working age population, over the next 20 years, the working age population in Africa will be greater than either of China or India, and that's hard to do. There are a lot, 1.3 billion people in each of those countries. And importantly for everybody in the room, you can argue these stats, we look at this stuff in my role as chair of WTTC, but if you look at international inbound tourism to Africa, which is circa 50 or 60 million right now, most of the numbers show that over the next 20 years it will double or triple. But having said that, everybody in this room knows you can add up all the big brand, all the global brands, and certainly they're local brands, and they're represented in this room, and they're relevant in lots of ways. But I think there's opportunity, obviously, for the big global brands. You add up all the global brands and their entire presence on the continent. I think it's like 600 hotels. Yeah. So what I would argue is, massive underpenetration, and so huge demand growth over a very protracted period of time against what is limited supply, certainly from for the big global brands, means gargantuan opportunity. And so I think the next 20 years, if we do our job, even though we've been here a long time, we will experience exponential growth. If Patrick, wherever he is, does his job, and Mike Collini, our team, there they are smiling, we'll double our presence here in Africa in the next 5 years. And I think that's not a pipe dream, because we have a pipeline. You probably showed up there.
I just counted the dots while you were talking, and I see...
You're good with math, yeah.
Yeah,
you see about 60, a little less.
Yeah, no, I get 41 open and roughly 11,000 rooms.
Yeah, that's about right.
And about 53 in the pipeline with a similar number of rooms.
I
just did that while you were...
liberally on behalf of my developers.
No, I mean, listen, Pat, we can ask Patrick. It's pretty accurate, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. So that's doubling your portfolio.
That is.
So interesting, yesterday, there were a couple of very interesting stats that came out. So one was that we're expecting Africa, just to keep pace with current forecasts of population growth, will have to create 50,000 jobs per day, if you can believe that. And there are only 4 countries in the entire continent with 50,000 or more rooms, which was also a remarkable sort of stat. So, the opportunity is huge. I know that if you're looking at your pipeline, Hilton, obviously, your core brand is still a key part of that, but also Garden Inn and DoubleTree, particularly Garden Inn. I mean,
Particularly Garden Inn.
where do you see the opportunity for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're, again, in the category of just getting started. We've got a couple Hilton Garden Inns. I think we've 16 of the 53 you saw in that pipeline are Garden Inn. But in many of the markets around Africa, I mean, obviously, if the market will support it, just like it did in Nairobi.
I meant cities, obviously.
Yeah,
50,000
we want to do a core Hilton brand because it's you got the broadest awareness of any hospitality brand on earth, including here in Africa. But the reality is, even though cost to build here may not be as much as it is in other parts of the world, the economics don't support it, in as many markets as you would like. And so Hilton Garden Inn, in effect, becomes the next best thing. It obviously has the Hilton brand awareness front and center because it is Hilton Garden Inn, and from a cost to build, rate structure, and the like, it comes in underneath from a operating cost point of view. Given it is a limited service concept, it would drive higher margins, and the economics in many markets around Africa will support it. So I suspect when you wake up in 5 or 10 years, the bulk of our growth will be in the limited service, what we call focus service segment. It won't all be just Garden Inn. I think it will start with that, and we want to build a network effect.
DoubleTree, Hampton,
and then DoubleTree, which is full service, but we ultimately will bring Hampton by Hilton to this market. I don't think it makes sense to do it until we get Garden Inn going. Here's the other thing when you talk about limited service, I say this all the time. We all, many of us like to stay in high-end hotels and luxury hotels, and gosh, I do, like staying in Waldorfs.
That's why I went into the
Conrads,
industry.
and, it's wonderful. But the reality is, if you look at Africa, if you look at Asia, frankly, if you look at even the more mature markets, you look at America and Europe, the bulk of demand growth in our industry now, and I would say for the rest of everybody's life in this room, is going to be mid-market. So what does that mean? And particularly in emerging markets like Africa, throughout the continent, throughout Asia, it's mid-market. Well, mid-market means, it's coming out of the growth in the middle class, which in the emerging markets is exponential growth. What can they afford? Mid-price brands.
Yep.
That's where the demand's going to be. So not only do I think when we wake up, say, fast forward 20 years, the bulk of our growth, that doesn't mean we're not going to do a lot of other brands. We're going to do plenty of Hiltons that will always lead the way for us. We're going to do plenty of DoubleTrees, and we'll bring other brands beyond Garden Inn to this market. We have a Curio, opening. I'm going to be Friday opening in Lagos Airport. So we'll have lots of other brands. But if you look at the density by room count, if you fast forward 10 or 20 years, it will be in the mid-market. And that will be true in every major geography in the world, simply because that's where the demand is. In our, in our business model, not surprisingly, we got a lot of our partners and investors here. We're not building these things, both because we can't have enough local expertise, plus our model is a capital-light model. So what we're trying to do is match, the demand patterns that we see with capital to make magic, which is deliver a great product, and great service relative to what the customer wants, but then to make sure that our real estate partners are getting adequate returns to want to continue to invest capital. Well, that means we got to be really smart about making sure that we are matching, that we are building the right products in the right place, the right time, cost to build, cost to operate, margins, profitability, support the underlying investment. And that will be lots of different brands in Africa. In the end, I suspect, when we wake up in 10 years, we'll have at least half of our core portfolio here. But if you look at the rooms, it will be a lot of limited service.
So just picking up on something you said there, so, obviously building smart. I know you guys are doing quite a lot in that field. Innovation, the industry perhaps is not particularly renowned as, it's basically...
Yeah, we're the industry that gave you like 3-inch foam mattresses in floral bedspreads.
Correct.
And we thought that was innovation.
It's difficult to identify.
I think it's better now.
Do you?
I do think it's better.
What do you think? What are you folks doing in that area?
Well, here,
that you would say is...
call me crazy, but what we're doing is we're listening to our customers a lot more. I think the history, God knows we don't have enough time to do it all, but the long history of our industry has really been about sort of iconic leaders, judging what they thought customers wanted, because the industry was not mature, and really in some ways the customers didn't know what they wanted because it was an evolving industry. Well, here's the thing. Even in emerging markets, it's a much more mature industry. Customers, everybody stays in hotels. Everybody knows what their needs are and what their likes and dislikes are. So the industry, and certainly we at Hilton, need to pay a lot more attention to what they're telling us. What they're telling us, directly, but more importantly, what their behavior is telling us about what they want. So I think the industry is much better. I think we're, of course I'm going to say this, but I happen to believe it. I think we're leading the industry in how we're innovating. And innovation for us is very much a holistic experiment. It's not, all the oxygen wants to get sucked out of the room, that innovation is just about technology. And I'll come to that. Technology is a huge part of it. Okay, but it's a lot of other things. It's basic products. So all of what we're doing with our existing brands, how we're modifying Garden Inn for this continent versus what we do in China versus what we do in India, how we add new brands is innovating, right? What other products do our customers want? How we innovate with service, how we innovate with food and beverage. All of the demands around the world can be a little bit different regionally, but importantly, are just changing broadly on a global basis.
By the way, I should just say that Hilton claimed the credit for, I'm just going to list these things, you can tell me.
Claim credit, or that sounds sketchy.
It's
I think we can prove credit.
It's your PR
well, it depends
guys.
what you're going to say.
Well, let me see. You tell me if this is correct. Apparently, they're the first to introduce air conditioning.
Yes.
First to put televisions in rooms.
Yes.
Apparently, they claim credit for the brownie, creating
Yes.
it. I mean, he was talking about food and beverages.
The martini.
And the pina colada.
Martini.
Is any of this true?
By the way, we invented, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow when we open the Hilton Garden Inn Nairobi. We invented the airport.
I'm staying there tomorrow night.
We invented the airport hotel. So we invented, well, we all laugh. Somebody did it first, right?
And was
somebody
it you?
figured out maybe you could put a hotel near an airport for those that get stranded, et cetera. So we were the first to do it. It was at San Francisco Airport a long, long time ago, way before my time. So we've had as I described earlier, both a pioneering spirit, but an innovative spirit. And that spirit is alive and well inside the company with our product, with our service, with food and beverage, with loyalty, trying to figure out, like, how do you not have loyalty just be about points, and creating real experiences that are things that differentiate us, that customers just can't get from anybody else or get on their own. And then technology, okay? There is a huge element of technological innovation that's really important. It's not to get the people out of the hotels. A core element of what we are and what we stand for at Hilton, and I think as an industry, is about being a business of people serving people. That's never going to change. I go to the Nairobi Hilton, and the life, the heart and soul of that place is the people.
So just on that, Chris, because yesterday, and you obviously didn't see this, we heard a lot about, robots. And, there were a couple of videos actually played of robots running up and down corridors, greeting people and taking them to their room. And here you are, and we've all heard it endlessly, this is a people business. How does the audience take this? I mean, where do you stand on this issue?
You have a funny accent, so I finally figured out you were talking about robots. But, in a crass, here's the thing.
That's a traffic light.
We're not going to have robots, cleaning rooms or doing any of those tasks anytime soon. I'm not saying it won't happen someday. I doubt it in my lifetime. But there are a bunch of things, and we're doing them, that are more mechanical, and that, the machines can do better than humans. And importantly, it can free up the humans to think about how they have a more direct relationship with the customer and how they personalize the experience with the customer. I'll give you some examples of things that we're doing, a couple of big ones. Digital check-in, digital room selection, digital key. Not everybody wants to do that in every market in the world, but a lot of people do. And the bulk of our customers, when you get down to it, are road warriors. They come in like I did last night. You're tired. It's nice to get an email coming in from the airport. Pick your room. Here's your key, and you don't have to do anything. The bulk of travelers really want that. And so, it means that in the end, you probably need fewer people at the front desk if that really gets adopted at a mass scale, which I certainly hope it does. But that means you can have people, instead of behind a desk, they can be out in the lobby. They can be out figuring out what they need to do to curate and personalize the experience. Connected room, which is not here on this continent yet, but will be coming soon. is, again, it's not, it's not substituting for people, but the reality is we all have, our content with us, right? We have our Netflix account or our Spotify or whatever kind of music, we all have these things now we can carry around on our device. We all have, different needs in terms of temperatures in rooms and what we want from an, audio visual, and what pillows we want, how we want to, interact and order room service, all these things. What we've developed is, a proprietary technology that basically allows you to control your whole experience when you're in your room, so that it's much more personalized. So it's not taking away, it's not robots doing anything, it's machines basically creating a more personalized experience that give you more of the comforts at home. The one thing we all know, I mean, there may be exceptions to this rule, but I would say, as a road warrior myself, boy, it's nice when you go somewhere just to have some of the comforts of home. So imagine, like walking into a room, and if you're Spotify, that your accounts all are loaded up, all of your content, audio, visual, what temperature you want the room, with lighting, all of those things are sort of preloaded. Pictures of your loved ones or your dog are rotating on the TV. And we can do all that before you get there, because once you're in the building and you've checked in with digital key, we know you're in the building, and we can turn all that, we can activate all that stuff. That's a way that's not really taking the human element out of it. It's just personalizing the experience in ways that we can do very inexpensively with modern technology and cloud computing, and we can do very consistently. So it's things like that, not put the robots in charge, but things that will take friction out of the experience and add a little bit more delight to the experience, create a little bit more of the comforts of home for those that are not at home, maybe,
Yep.
and that have some level of stress or strain typically associated with their travel.
Understand. So one of your other roles is chairman of the World Travel and Tourism Council.
Indeed, yes.
Obviously, I know that as we touched on, conservation is a big issue at the moment, continues to be a big issue in Africa. Obviously, wildlife is part of the natural infrastructure. Unfortunately, it's being decimated at the moment. I know sustainability and the environment are high on your agenda. Can you say a little about what you think you as Hilton are doing, and what you think the industry is doing, and whether you think, frankly, it's enough? I know you're talking about slashing your footprint in half. Do you think there's enough being done specifically here in Africa?
I'd say the answer is, well, maybe on behalf of WTTC first, and then Hilton. WTTC, one of our primary objectives, one of the top three things, is sustainable tourism, with the simple belief that if we don't act responsibly, whether that's overcrowding destinations or the environmental side of it, we're not going to have an industry, right? Ultimately, you're going to have a backlash from peoples around the world and governments around the world that's going to take what is a spectacular golden age of travel, where for the rest of our lives we can expect to have great growth, and it's going to systematically shut it down. So we need to be responsible, and WTTC is making it front and center, both with me as chair, but otherwise because of others in the industry. Inevitably, I would say no, the industry is not doing enough. I think it's great that WTTC is making it a primary objective. I think we're getting broad buy-in from the industry, but I think we're early days. I think that would be the honest truth. I think we need to do more. I think it's like any of these things, you start slow and you gotta, baby steps, and you gotta get moving faster. So I would encourage everybody in the industry, don't underestimate it. There are already destinations around the world where we're starting to see backlash, and it will impair the ability of this industry to prosper. At Hilton, as part of 2030 UN Sustainable Goals, we set out some pretty ambitious goals for our world in 2030, and that was to have our environmental impact and double our investment in social impact around the world. And we're serious about it. We have a little bit of time between now and 2030, but we're not going to wait till the end. We've been huge advocates for sustainable tourism in every way, and we have, been trying to lead the industry, not only, as my role at WTTC, but as a company to set a good example. And I think we're making, really good progress. Like anything, you got to set goals and you got to measure against it, which we do. It's not just these wonderful, sort of pie in the sky things. On the environmental side and social impact side, we measure it. We actually build it into compensation systems around the world, and we're awfully serious about it. Here in Africa, I'd say it's as important as anywhere in the world. We just announced, I think yesterday, an initial $1 million investment.
1 million?
1 million initial. We over time it'll become much bigger than that. To focus on what we call our Big Five. We thought that was appropriate being here in Africa. And then we've talked about a number of the issues, youth opportunity, which is a big issue for our industry, water stewardship, which is a big issue around the world, but particularly here in Africa, anti-human trafficking, which again, Africa, is a big issue front and center, but other parts of the world, local sourcing, which can be, incredibly beneficial to local communities, and then wildlife protection. Here. That is not as big an issue in other parts of the world, but for the reasons, Nick, you suggested earlier in your question and comment, that's a big deal here. Again, if we don't protect the wildlife here, both from a sourcing point of view and from the standpoint of, the wildlife in effect being a part of the venue, then Africa's not going to have the appeal. Like you're going to, that's one of the most magical thing, magical Kenya, a large part of the magic is with the, in the wilderness and with wildlife. And if we're not responsible about it, and on this continent in particular, but a lot of places, that will suffer the consequences.
Well, just to remind everyone, there's a charitable auction which is being held this evening, so hopefully at the Norfolk Hotel, when you guys are there for drinks, everyone will remember to bid and
drink a lot and then bid a lot.
Yeah, there's plenty of Tuskers, so we'll get the Tuskers in, and then we'll get the bidding in.
Make sure you wait for the actual bidding to let everybody loosen up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think we'll. These people don't need training and loosening up. They're pretty good. Chris, what? Perhaps, obviously, as we get to the end, what do you think? What would you see the major challenges facing the industry from where you sit in DC, apart from your president? Is there anything else?
I'm going to stay away from that one for obvious reasons. I don't want to be tweeted about. I think in a sense, I think we've talked about them. I think the opportunity in front of all of us in this industry is off the charts good. I say it constantly to our team. I really believe in the golden age of travel thing. I just think if you look at the two mega trends of, emerging middle classes and people wanting, not just young people, but particularly young people wanting more experiences, I think it portends unbelievable things, for the growth of our industry. And I think those trends, not everything can reverse itself, but they don't appear to be trends that will reverse themselves anytime soon. So I think sort of the underpinning of this is spectacular, but we could screw it up. It's like anything else. And so, what do I worry about? I worry about protectionism. I'm not just picking on maybe my country, but frankly, it's not the only place in the world, where there's, a bit of populism and protectionism going on. I worry that leads to borders closing down and it being harder to get, to cross borders, which we've all in this industry worked really hard to, make it easier, not harder. I worry about, overcrowding in destinations, which we talked about. I worry about the environmental side of the business and governments around the world if we're not responsible about the environment eventually, without not having a choice but to shut us down. So we talked about a couple of those. Those would be the things I worry about. I think that they're all manageable, but I think they take effort. I've been involved, not just WTTC, but, lots of different organizations. And I won't, one of my contemporaries in the business said, what do you do? You can't have the time to, for WTTC. And first of all, WTTC is a wonderful organization. But I said, if not me, who? I mean, the reality is we could all say, let somebody else do it. And I'm traveling, and I got a busy life, trying to be a father of 6, a husband, and run Hilton. But reality is these are important issues, and we all have to sort of do our part to lead the charge. I think if we do, and we're responsible actors as an industry, and all of us sort of pitch in a little bit, I think we'll be fine. But I think we better focus on those. Yep. We better focus on those things. And the bigger trend of populism is one that we don't have as much control over. I would argue, and I do it constantly. In fact, I was at the White House with our president 3 weeks ago, with a few others that are U.S. based, making the comment about, listen, this is ultimately big time important to the economy and jobs in the United, regardless of what you think, it is an export. Every time somebody comes to any of our countries and spends their money and goes back home, it drives, like in Kenya, 10%, in the United States, roughly 10%, globally 10% of GDP growth, and roughly the same, 1 in 10 jobs is coming from travel and tourism, 1 in 5 new jobs is coming from travel and tourism. So if that isn't important, I don't know what is. So I think that, we all, in all of our jurisdictions, can play a part in reinforcing that, notwithstanding, some of these protectionist trends, that there's an understanding of the consequences of not paying attention to the benefits of travel and tourism.
I think, we heard from the UN WTO Secretary General this morning, one of the greatest challenges in Africa in particular is visas. And, he was basically saying...
By the way, that's one of the greatest challenges everywhere. It is, we make it, I mean, in the perfect world, we would have a global visa entry system where, for those, the 99.9% of the people that want to do no harm to anybody, that they would be sort of a trusted traveler and be able to cross borders all over the world. And we are, at WTTC and other organizations, working really hard on that. It's the trends are not good to getting towards that, but we should not stop.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that time's up. Chris, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
We should really get the auction going right now.
The auction?
Yeah. What do you think? Should we?
Yes. And there
were, what are you bidding on? Which prize?
Which auction?
It's all based
You didn't get everybody loosened up yet. I'll make a bid. What do you want me to bid on?
Stuff like that.
I want to bid on the safari.
How do you say
I have.
You say your surname. Can you just say it for me?
Okay. Tell me what it is.
You get your own adopted elephant. Okay, that's one.
Oh, I love that.
Can you export that?
I've always needed an elephant. Can I bring it home?
You're gonna get a 2-night stay for two
kids will love a pet elephant.
at the luxurious Finch Hatton's luxury tented camp.
It's very nice, actually, Chris. I stayed there. It's in Savo.
Okay.
Only takes
How
a
many
couple of
nights
days.
do I get?
You get 2 nights.
How many people?
2 people.
Okay, I have to leave.
no
I have
flights
to leave my
included.
6 kids at
No,
home.
no
but
flights included.
My
Chris,
wife
'cause-
will
'cause
appreciate
we
that.
know you have
which
your
means
own.
I'll pay more for it. Make her happy.
No flights because we know you have your own private jet.
I don't know anything about that.
So the value of this package is 5,000.
All right, I'll bid 10.
10.
10,000. It's a good cause.
Chris, whoa! That's fantastic. Okay, listen, that's not guaranteed. That's not guaranteed.
All right, if somebody
Okay,
wants to
'cause
bid
if
more,
someone
my
wants to
bid's
bid
10,000.
on that,
I
you know-
stand by a $10,000 bid. If somebody wants to pay
We
more,
might
they
go-
can have
I
it.
think
What
Nick's
you-
going to go more than 10,000 tonight.
Okay.
After
we're-
that beer. Clearly.
Starting bid at 10,000. Chris, thank you so much, and the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust are going to be
Great to
really
be here.
appreciated.
Thanks,
for that. So
everybody,
thanks
for
so
being
much.
here.
Thanks, Chris.